refer it to full council, and the other was to refer it back to Cabinet, which is what we elected to do. We felt that was actually the most sensible course of action. We'd had a good debate. We were able to question officers and get their support as well. So it was good and thorough, and I think we managed to cover all the elements that had been included in the call-in. So what our output from that was, firstly, there are two recommendations. The one is that it makes clear that Cabinet makes clear its desire that for the Leys Lane Kenilworth site, 40% of the passive house provision and 40% of the net zero carbon DPD zero bills are classified as affordable. We note the word desire there. We recognise that we can't have a commitment, we can't necessarily impose an intention, but a desire was probably as strong as we could ask for. And then secondly, that it tightens the wording within the decisions to be clear that local growth initiative LGI, that's LGI funds, are being used to fund the gap between the base scheme valuations and the enhanced scheme valuations. I think both of those are just a concern from members to make sure that the way that we're using public money is being used, particularly for our most vulnerable residents, and not purely for houses that could end up in the private ownership. There were then a number of comments that we made. So firstly, we thanked officers for their work in bringing forward the additional information to councillors, especially within the short time frame. And secondly, the committee advises that in future where issues with a complex financial history are brought forward, a detailed financial picture be provided to Cabinet. That was particularly in view of a part of the call-in that just expressed some concern that with the complex nature of the land transactions that have gone on with this particular site, the LGIs, etc., that actually we wanted to make sure that Cabinet had the fullest picture possible before making a decision. And then finally, that we would like to see a lessons learned report on the Kenilworth school sites by the end of 2026, which includes a project governance review. This report should also be focused on presenting as much information as possible in the public domain. Those were the comments and two recommendations from scrutiny.
Thank you, Councillor Milton. I will go now to Councillor Matetsky from the Conservative Group, whether you'd like to add anything at this point.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I would like to add a few things. Our group has some real serious concerns about these proposals, and we would like to thank everyone who's worked on these proposals and the work that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has put into this. But as a general comment, first of all, we feel that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has missed the mark on this occasion. I think about the only time I can say that we feel that they've not really hit the right tone. There's several things in it we think it's a bit, they've contradicted themselves. When they first debated the Cabinet paper before it went to Cabinet, there was a recommendation, which is in the paper today, that the best possible value of the asset should be achieved. And then in the call-in, the recommendations talk about passive house, etc. Well, those two are slightly contradictory. The moment you start to have passive house, etc., that is going to devalue the asset, and therefore you're not going to be able to do both. You're not going to be able to maximise the return of the asset and have passive house. And we've also got concerns about who's going to pick up these passive house houses. The council, as virtually all social housing providers, have a business model when they are picking up basically what will be Section 106 housing. And if you're going to start having 40% of those are going to be social housing, the passive houses are going to be social housing, that may well be a bridge too far for the housing revenue account to actually pass it through as a viable business model. And so we have great concerns that you could end up with nobody actually taking them. So that's a serious concern that we have. And we feel that basically the decision that was originally made was by council to purchase the sites, and we feel that it should have gone back to council, because now we got a very different picture in front of us to what this council actually agreed to purchase the sites and what we were going to do with it. So what we want to do is bring up a governance point of view, where normally any decision over £150,000 has to go to, which costs the council more than £150,000, needs to go to council. And we are pretty sure that the restraints being put on the sale of the asset to any potential developer will devalue the value of that land by more than 150,000. So we feel that in itself should bring it to council as a decision. But also the fact that it affects more than 2 wards, and we got 2 school sites here in 2 different wards, and whether that's a positive or a negative effect on those 2 wards, the Constitution does say that if it affects 2 or more wards, then it should go to council. So we think there's a governance issue that Cabinet is not in a position to make these decisions because of what it says in the Constitution, and we have got very huge reservations about what is being asked. We feel there's a process in place. We have a planning process. We have an SPD. We have our aspirations to be climate zero, and any developer, whoever that is, should be made to stick to those. There shouldn't be any imposition by this council that devalues our own assets for political aspirations. We are here as custodians of the taxpayers' funds, and we should really seriously consider that. What are we doing with those funds? I mean, the money this is going to cost us, wherever it comes from, could be going towards the new stadium, for instance, you know, the new community stadium, which will benefit far more residents than this will. So I urge you to really consider this and possibly defer this back to council for full consideration. Thank you.
Okay, a number of points there. I'll just ask Graham Leach, our monitoring officer, about the one about over 150k, so needs to go to council. Is that correct?
Thank you, Leader. In my covering report to Cabinet this evening, there is a section in the financial part which sets out clearly your authority to take this decision as Cabinet. I am slightly confused by the statement from Councillor Matetsky because I don't recognise that as a requirement for Council to take decisions over £150,000. The key decision value is a value for Cabinet, and therefore that would be one for you there. The same applies for key decisions in terms of 2 or more wards. That is also relating to executive functions, which is what the Cabinet is delivering. So I'm quite happy if Councillor Matetsky can show me that part, and I'll have a look at the Constitution. But from my perspective, you'll see in the report I have come to the view and taken legal advice on that aspect, that actually this is a decision for you to take as Cabinet.
Councillor Melrose, did you want to come in?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chair. And I think some of the questions Councillor Matetsky has mentioned is about basically was what the debate turned into, because I think the debate did start around that, and then by the time we got to the end of that 2 hours, these were the recommendations that were voted unanimously across the committee, and they unanimously decided they did discuss, does it go to council, does it not, and they made the decision that it should come to back to Cabinet with the 2 recommendations. So they did discuss, is it best of financial money? They did discuss about purchasing, you know, if we are to purchase these houses on this site, I said it would be standard practice. There would be a report that would come, and Andrew Rollins would do an assessment like he would do in every single case. The desire was around that 40% of saying we don't want all passive housing, let's say with DPD, to be just going to private. They'd want it to be part of our collective, and that's where this desire came from, and actually there was a lot of discussion, debate of how the word should be stated. So I think just to reassure you that that conversation did happen. There was a lot of detail in that further report. Feel free to read it. And like I said, it was a unanimous decision across all 6 parties to bring it back to Cabinet, not Council, because they had the opportunity to bring it to Council on Wednesday last week.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to say anything generally? Okay, I think it's probably best we go through a few things in turn, and our monitoring officer may say if I'm doing the process wrong. But I think the first thing was we should go through the statements, questions that Councillor Milton has raised on behalf of overview and scrutiny, and then we go to the original Cabinet recommendations were made, and then see if we're content with them or we feel they should be changed. So if we go to the sort of more minor ones, the later ones, because they are the easier ones, if you like. Thanking officers, definitely. Dave Elkington, Strategic Director, over here at the minute, has worked incredibly hard, as have many of the other officers, to get this forward. But I'd also like to thank particularly the Chair of ONS and ONS for agreeing to see it so soon, and I think that's because councillors generally realise the haste required here. Like many organisations, Homes England do have a financial end of year, and if we dilly-dally around, we could miss the opportunity, which could have massive financial implications. The next one about complex financial history, this is a difficult one because we always say don't give us too long a report, but then we need more detail. And it is difficult because all councillors had a briefing in August about it, which had some of the broad brush financial issues. And then there was a report in October, which, although confidential, had a lot more. And so I take the point, and a lot of things were clarified at ONS, so thank you on that. Don't personally feel it affects the decisions, because it is this a good deal, not whether we've sort of looked under every stone, which kind of brings me on to the third one. I'd like to see a lessons learned report. Now, I know informally, Councillor Melrose, you've said that a long time ago. I don't know if it was in the report or formal, but can you say a little bit about that?
Yes, so I remember my first speech as portfolio of housing. I think this was one where I said there's been a lot of lessons learned of purchasing the property, because I state from the offset, I think when they purchased the property, I think everything was in the right intentions. I think there were things outside of our control, and in hindsight, that we can learn from. So I appreciate when we purchased sites, we didn't know about the interest rates, we didn't know what was going, there's so many factors outside of the control, like when we all agreed the net zero DPD. There's been stuff that we've done that have influenced that land value, but also going actually where, if we were to do this project again, what could we learn from it? And I think there's big learning, especially as we go into LGR, that we can take and make sure it happens in that way. But I think it was one where I said, actually, I think it needs to be everyone, because I said I appreciate this has gone through so many different administrations, but actually just having that sit down going, okay, what happened here, and learning that. Because a lot of residents ask the questions when I've been to resident meetings, how come it's took so long? What is, what was the purpose of this? Why am I hearing this figure, when there's been by-elections? So I think there's just more having as much as open in the public as we can, because there's been a lot of misgivings or misrumours. Like I heard there was going to be a casino there, which was brand new information to me, and I said there isn't. So I think it's more to get it all out in the open, especially like what we've just done with the paddling pools. I think actually having that open information, saying this is what we're going to learn from it, is really important. And I think this is where we had that conversation at ONS and saying it's something I've been wanting to do, but I think it's something collectively we all want to do as well, because this has been a longer standing project, and I know there's other projects as well that we can take some learning from and avoid, but also what actually was outside of our collective control.
So thank you. And I think for public record, you gave a timeline for this, didn't you, at ONS?
We did say the end of the year was what we agreed.
Thank you. So Graham Leach has asked me to confirm. Well, I don't think we don't need to vote on these, but Cabinet members say if you disagree, for the number one, we're agreeing that we're thanking officers, and we're adding thanking ONS for doing excellent diligence in a very short period of time. I think we're noting the number two about the financial comment, that we could have included more on that. The third one is we're agreeing to the lessons learned, that we do want to see that. And as portfolio holder, Councillor Melrose says, that will be done, I think, by the end of this year, by end of 2026. So moving on to the two more important ones, ONS are asking Cabinet to make clear its desire that the Leys Lane Kenilworth site, 20% is of passive house provision and 40% of the zero bills are classified as affordable. Councillor Milton has said now that it's accepted it can't be a commitment as such, but Councillor Melrose, do you want to say whether you're happy with that?
Yes, so we did speak to officers afterwards about, and they did say it could create significant risk, obviously, at the moment, and we have gone and spoke to Homes England about it, and they've basically said, not now, not when this deal we're about to write, but they have said that what we can do as sort of an alternative to make sure we state our desire, intention, I'm sure we're getting flashbacks to all the words everyone used, is that we can instruct officers to express to Homes England within their future marketing of the sites to developers, because this has to go out to developers, is that we would like to obtain up to 40% of the enhanced environment specification units, including the passive house and the net zero bills equivalent. So we can instruct the officers to engage with the developer to take on the Homes England and commit to explore ways to facilitate it, and then explore mechanisms for some, subject to viable business cases, which I know was the point Councillor Matexley was on about, was we need to be viable business case at the time, and then request another report from officers, which obviously will outline that. And I think Councillor Davison, you're going to talk about the LGI.
Well, I think I'm going to say what I hope you said in what words. Anyway, so I think you said that in principle, yes, and in fact, Homes England have welcomed it because they think that might be of interest to developers to have a bit of confidence that the houses might be bought. So yes, you're quite right. Councillor Matetsky was saying, well, will people buy them? Well, if we're buying 40%, that's answered some of that question. And then the other bit, of course, is we're not saying we're going to buy them because they can charge whatever they want if we do that. So it is subject to robust financial analysis, payback periods and all the rest of it. Do we need to say something formal at this stage on this one? Graham Leach, our person running this.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's best for you to vote on those at the moment as your formal response to Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Do it separately.
So our formal response, does Councillor Melrose need to say some words, or do we just say, in principle, yes?
Through you, Leader, I'd be happy if the words of the Cabinet were you supported the recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny Committee, if that is what you're saying.
Is there anything that you need changing in that, Councillor Melrose?
Give me 1 minute.
I mean, I think what we're saying is whether just the word desire is fine or whether we need to be clear, which I know ONS were clear that we can't put it as a condition for Homes England. it's subject to the negotiations afterwards. Yes,
So I'm happy with the recommendation as laid out as it's a desire, appreciating that we'd have to explore and there'll be a further report coming.
so we should have organised this slightly more precisely. Can we just add the word subject to value for money considerations?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, great. Is that accurate enough? Yep. Yes, good. Okay, thank you. All those in favour of that, thank you very much. So we're agreeing with O&S on that. The second one that O&S have asked us to consider is tightens the wording within the decisions to be clear that Local Growth Initiative, LGI funds, are being used to fund the gap between the base scheme valuations and the enhanced scheme valuation. Do I have anyone who wants to speak to that, or should I start it off? So starting it off, in simple words, yes, we're clear that that's what we want. Of course, it gets a bit more complicated from that. So I'm going to read something out and then try and explain it. So Cabinet, the suggestion from officers is Cabinet requests a further report from officers which outlines specifically how LGI funding will be used to support the development of the Leys Lane school site. The report will consider that LGI will be used to fund the cost associated with the purchase of the Leys Lane site to a value that equates to the difference in valuation between the enhanced and baseline schemes as reported to and discussed by overview and scrutiny. Sorry, I'm going to slightly pause because that's actually the bit you asked about. And what it is saying is yes, but we can't, in effect for LGI, we need to submit a bill or an invoice. And you can't submit a bill or an invoice for a theoretical difference because that hasn't been bought. But what we can do is use, as I'm just repeating what I've just said, the funds, the costs associated with the purchase to that equivalent amount. So we're saying that amount that we discussed in confidential session at O&S, the LGI will use that amount to pay some of the purchase, even though it was years ago, because that has that's a bill. So that's why that wording is a little bit convoluted, but it is a yes. And then the next bit going on, because this is what we've just been talking about on the previous bit, if enhanced units are bought as affordable homes, the price of these enhancements, the report will consider how these can be funded from LGI, as would any increase in affordable homes bought above 40%. The report can fully explore these issues and the detailed mechanisms required to facilitate the use of LGI with the West Midlands Combined Authority. So that is saying, which I think addresses some of Councillor Matetsky's point, that if we are buying, say, passive houses that cost more, the HRA won't be paying that difference, that the LGI would be doing that. You will doubtless remember that the June report on LGI also said any increase above 40%. So there is an aspiration to have more affordable housing. And if that's the case, LGI funds could be used for that as well. Does anyone want to comment on that? Yes, Councillor Matetsky or Milton, you're welcome to.
Yeah, just question the legality of that. I mean, the HRA is a ring-fenced account. So could those funds be used to be subsidising purchasing of HRA stock? I mean, are we actually allowed to do that?
There are two bits. One is that the ring fence only works one way, as I said at ONS, so money can go into it, it can't come out. You use the word subsidy, so I'll turn to our chief executive on that one.
If you go back not to the school sites, but go back last year to all of the papers that you've had actually on the local growth initiative money, we were and sought to get clarity from the combined authority about what the money can be spent on. So one, it is capital, not revenue. And two, it does include that money going into housing. So you could use it to buy more homes for the housing revenue account, or, as you're discussing, to supplement the specification for those houses. That works with the grain of the housing revenue account, which, as Councillor Davison has said, it's a one-way street. You can put money into it from other sources, but you can't take money out from the HRA to go into other sources. So it's kind of a one-way street in that respect. The thing we would need to watch out for is if we were using LGI money and that was not going for, in a sense, a social good. So if it were going for private housing, we would need to be clear we were not breaching the subsidy control room in that respect. So in other words, we're not, and as your word, subsidising a private developer. So as you can for affordable housing, you can get a grant. The LGI is a grant.
Wouldn't use LGI as a grant, it's our business rates, but there we go. We'll redo that debate at another time. Yes, Councillor Milton.
Thank you, Chair. I think I understand the alternative words that you read out. I think what we were trying to achieve, or members on scrutiny were concerned about, was actually that visibility and transparency about how LGI money is being used here. So I sort of understand the technicalities, I think, from what you're outlining. I think what was interesting on the night was, I think, when we started to talk about this particular point, to ask for it to be made clearer, I think the initial response from some of the, portfolio holders was, well, it's in there, isn't it? And then I think when we looked, we found that it wasn't in there. So I think a clarification to give it a bit more transparency is definitely a valuable thing to have, because it does seem quite an important thing to make sure that the paper is clear on.
Don't know if David Elkington wants to come in, but the basic principle that you've asked for, that the difference between the baseline and enhanced is funded by LGI, we're saying yes. The how that's done financially used a lot of words. Would you like to say any more? Okay, thank you very much. Any other points to raise there? Okay, well, I think then we go to a vote on whether that wording as a response, which is the long bit I read out. I hope I don't need to read it again. Please. Okay, so all those in favour of that. Thank you very much. Okay, good. So we've now agreed in substantive terms two things with ONS. One is clarity on the LGI funding will be made clear at a future report, because we don't quite know the mechanism yet, and that we use the word desire, haven't we, for affordable 40% of the passive house, and the zero bills our desire is for them to be affordable. So we now turn to our original cabinet paper and see with the 5 recommendations whether it has a material impact on any of those. I feel that number 1, because it notes the update, number 4 notes the work on Rouncil Lane, and number 5 notes the use that the Chief Exec used delegated authority for planning application fees. we don't need to discuss unless I hear, because they're just noting, they're not substantive decisions. So the substantive ones were recommendation 2, to delegate authority, strategic director in consultation with a lot of people, to enter contract for the disposal of the Lays Lane site, subject to the financial value achieved being within the tolerance outlined in confidential appendix. Suitable environmental enhancements are agreed to include 10% Passive House Plus and at least a further 10% homes to be built above Warwick District Council's net zero DPD standards. And C, savings made on abnormal costs as outlined in confidential appendix will be returned to Warwick District Council on a shared basis through an uplift in land value once confirmed. And D, a mechanism will be included in the contract to proportionately relieve WDC of its obligations regarding the housing infrastructure grant for the Lays Lane site. Now, I don't think there's anything there about the two changes that ONS have recommended. So unless, okay. So the item 3, recommendation 3, was that Cabinet notes that when, sorry, that's a note, oh, it is another note, oh, sorry. Recommendation 3, that Cabinet notes that when Homes England enter contract with a developer, Warwick District Council's housing development team will engage with them to discuss higher levels of affordable housing provision. So again, I don't think that's so if nobody wants to speak to that, I will say that, where I've got my wording, that what we have to do for the call-in procedure is decide whether we confirm the original decision or amend the original decision. And from the chair, I'm proposing that we confirm the original decision because none of the 5 recommendations should be altered. So can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Melrose. All those in favour? Thank you very much. I think now we're on to public and... Oh.
Did you note the call-in procedure, which is one of the recommendations in my report?
I thought we did to begin with, but not necessarily formally. So I trust we have followed the call-in procedure and that we have all noted that. Yes. Good. Thank you.
So if I can come in. So, Leader, through you now, because you have decided not to amend any of your decisions, it's then a question whether you feel the need to exclude the press and public because the other information is confidential appendices rather than recommendations from memory.
Yes, I thought we might need to go into confidential session, but I think we've actually covered what we need to. So if no, Councillor Children.
So just for clarity, Leader, so although we've not changed any of those 5 recommendations, we have added some two additional actions, but that doesn't constitute. We've kind of added 2 extra things, but we don't have to add. That's different from changing the original decision. Is that correct?
My understanding, this is a process where lots of things are going on, aren't there? We are making commitments that there will be a report about how the LGI money is used, and that there will also be a decision on purchasing or not affordable housing. So those are decisions later down, in formal terms, later down the road.
So through you, Chair, if you go back to the call-in procedure, there are criteria of why the decision can or cannot be called in. In this instance, for bringing the report up, the decision was called in because there was a need. From those who called it in, felt there was a need for the Cabinet to provide further information around the decision it took. My interpretation is that went to Overview and Scrutiny Committee debated that, looked at the information and was requested to be called in because there was extra information provided by officers. You've now considered that, and that information is provided in the public domain. No, the scrutiny comments is rather than the appendix. That is not public.
So just checking, Graham, our monitoring officer, that we don't need to go into confidential session.
My view is you don't need to because you've considered that confidential information without discussing it. It's just a question. You could, if you wanted to, ask Councillor Madexi and Councillor Milton if they felt there was a need for any points within that, but I'm seeing shaking of the head, so I'm happy for you to close the meeting if you want to.
Okay, so just to say, please don't rush away afterwards, but thank you very much, and I, yes, declare this meeting closed. Yeah, don't rush away.